In the near future, science has progressed so far that people can literally have themselves shrunk to about 5 inches tall. In this tiny form, they eat far less, take up almost no space, and can afford huge, luxury homes because normal world money stretches incredibly far in the mini world. The idea comes from a Norwegian researcher, Dr. Jorgen, who invents a procedure called downsizing to tackle problems like overcrowding and climate pressure. He and his wife are among the first 36 human test subjects. Once reduced, the group is kept in a sealed, breathable enclosure only a few meters long, so they are safe from animals and insects. All the rubbish the 36 of them produce over 4 years fits inside this small setup, which proves how little waste the tiny people generate. The process appears safe, miniature children are soon born, and the story becomes global news. When the film's main character, Paul, hears about this on TV, he is stunned. He rushes home to tell his mother, who jokes that doctors can apparently shrink a whole person, but still cannot sort out her chronic back pain. A decade later, downsizing has gone mainstream. With food, water, and housing under pressure, more and more people choose to live small because their environmental footprint and living costs drop dramatically. In the tiny world, life is incredibly cheap. People can afford miniature mansions, eat only a few grams of food each day, and still save most of their money. Paul now works as an occupational therapist and lives with his wife, Audrey, but they are under financial pressure. He has always dreamed of a bigger home, yet it has never been within their budget. At a party, Paul runs into his old friend Dave, who has already undergone the downsizing procedure. Dave admits that he did it less to save the planet and more to save his own lifestyle. He explains that in the miniature community they enjoy top-tier houses, equipment, and healthcare while needing far less income. Most of their time is spent reading, playing music, and relaxing, not worrying about bills. This conversation stays with Paul. When a bank turns down Paul and Audrey's mortgage application, they decide to visit one of these small communities. The tour blows them away. A full diamond set costs around $80, and their current net worth of about $152,000 would translate to roughly $12 million once they are small. In that world, they can own a luxury house, a car, and all the comforts they have always wanted. Convinced, they choose to go through with downsizing, sell off their possessions, resign from their jobs, and say emotional goodbyes. They travel to the facility, where a special bus accommodates both full-size and mini people. After completing the paperwork, the medical staff shave their heads, remove any dental work, and inject the shrinking solution before placing them into the treatment rooms. When the process is finished, the newly tiny patients are gently scooped up on trays and moved to miniature hospital beds, tended by already downsized doctors. Paul's prosthetic teeth are put back in, and when he wakes, a nurse offers him a normal-sized cookie that, at his new scale, could feed him for days. Paul asks for Audrey, and the nurse gives him a phone. On the call, Audrey is furious. She has just learned her hair and eyebrows would be removed and blames Paul for pushing her into it. In reality, she has bailed out at the last second and stayed full size. They argue bitterly, and Paul realizes he has committed to this new life alone. He is driven to his new mansion, a lavish property in the tiny community that would be about the size of a potato in the real world. On paper, he is now extremely wealthy, but emotionally, he feels abandoned. That night, he watches a news story about a Vietnamese activist who opposes downsizing. A year later, Audrey has never gone through with the procedure, and Paul signs the divorce papers, officially ending their marriage from inside his miniature city. After the divorce, things get awkward for Paul. Audrey takes half their money, forcing him out of his grand miniature mansion into a much smaller flat, and he now works a low-paid call center job. At a birthday party, he runs into Dave again, who is still furious at Audrey for abandoning Paul and says downsizing wasn't the problem, she was. Paul, however, calls the whole procedure the worst decision of his life. Dave urges him to move on and jokes that single mothers are the best option. Soon, Paul is out on a date with a woman named Kristen. They chat about how the tiny city feels like a normal town, just without birds or bugs. Their evening is interrupted when loud music pounds from the apartment above, and Paul starts shouting at the neighbors. One of them, Dusan, comes downstairs, points out that everyone in the building is friendly, and invites them upstairs instead of arguing. When the date ends and Kristen turns away from a goodbye kiss, an embarrassed Paul storms off and joins the party. The night turns wild. Paul drinks heavily, flirts and kisses strangers, and eventually passes out on Dusan's floor. In the morning, he wakes up amid the mess while a cleaning crew tidies the place. Dusan explains his philosophy. People shrink so they can own things they never could before, and a smart person can import luxury items from the big world, split them into thousands of small pieces, and make a fortune. While heading to the bathroom, Paul notices one of the cleaners pocketing medication from the cabinet. He recognizes her as Ngoc Lan, the Vietnamese activist he once saw on the news, who had been forcibly downsized, imprisoned, and later escaped. She now walks with a crude prosthetic leg. Paul adjusts the prosthesis, and she assumes he is a doctor. She begs him to help a sick friend, and they travel by bus far out from the glossy center of the community. Paul is shocked to find a vast, hidden slum of many people living in cramped units, short on food, medical care, and basic comforts. Lon explains that her husband died during the shrinking procedure when staff failed to remove his gold teeth, causing a fatal complication. Another friend has cancer but cannot afford treatment, so Lon has been stealing painkillers to ease her suffering. Paul does what he can that day, but work forces him to leave, and the situation weighs on him. He returns the next day only to learn that Lan's friend has died. When he tries to adjust Lan's artificial leg again, he accidentally breaks it, so he starts carrying her and cleaning houses in her place. Residents often hand over leftover food, which the two of them share with the hungry in the poor district. Over time, Paul becomes a respected helper there, using his skills and free time to support the sick and vulnerable. One day, Doosan calls for cleaners and is startled to see Paul arrive with the crew. Doosan tells him he has a new opportunity, a run to Norway to deliver a mysterious shipment with the promise of serious money. Captain Conrad will pilot the boat. When they tell Lon, she learns Paul is heading to the original downsized colony in Norway, where Dr. Jorgen still lives. Lon insists on traveling too. At first, the men refuse, but she explains that after she was forcibly downsized, Dr. Jorgen personally apologized in a letter, saying his invention had been abused in her case and inviting her to visit his original colony. She never had the money to go. Hearing this, the group takes pity on her and agrees she can come along. The four of them set out on a long sea journey in Conrad's boat. During the voyage, they encountered Dr. Jorgen and his wife on their yacht. Jorgen shares grim news. The release of methane from the Arctic has triggered a runaway chain reaction, and he believes this process will eventually wipe out humanity. Under the weight of that revelation, Paul and Lon admit their fears and feelings to each other, unsure how much time the world has left. When they finally reach the first downsized settlement in Norway, Paul discovers that Jorgen had predicted such a catastrophe. Hidden inside a mountain is a huge underground complex designed as a refuge for the colony. The plan is for the community to move inside, seal the tunnels, survive there for thousands of years, and then send their descendants back to the surface once the planet recovers. The residents trust Jorgen completely, and Paul is moved by his speech about preserving human life. Excited and anxious, Paul decides he wants to join the group going into the mountain and asks Lon to come with him. She refuses, arguing that he does not have to hide for 8,000 years to matter. He could help real people right now by returning to their community. Paul still chooses the vault, and the ceremony begins. As the entrance slowly closes, he imagines leaving Lon and the slum dwellers behind, and, at the last moment, sprints back out, choosing life with her over a distant future underground. They all return to Leisureland, where Paul commits to Lan's mission. Together with Doosan and Conrad, he helps deliver food, medicine, and basic supplies to the forgotten mini-residents living in the crowded tenements outside the shiny center. The story ends with Paul fully embracing his role